Hi everybody, my name is Jonathon Silva and welcome into our third part of our Excel to Power BI series here on YouTube. What I wanted to do for this video is focus solely on PowerPivot, or the data model inside of Excel. One of the great amazing features that lives in the back end of Excel, if you have it as an add-in, that you can enable to go ahead and let you really take all of those limitations that Excel has, all those row limits and just general data crunching limits that Excel has, and then get rid of them. Go ahead, jump into PowerPivot, use the data model to really enhance everything you're doing in Excel, to really free up the data, let you do what you want and when you want to, and really make everything work for you. So let's go ahead, jump right into an Excel workbook. We're going to import some data, and then we're going to showcase how we can leverage the data model, otherwise known as PowerPivot, to really let us take control of everything we want to do, everything we want to see with our data. All right, so here we just have a blank Excel workbook. And on this workbook, I'm gonna go ahead and add in some data. Now, the data that I'm gonna pull in actually is from a folder. I'm gonna leverage the ability here in Excel to go ahead and pull in data from an entire folder. Now, the data that I'm pulling in is all about international sales data for our company. And we have our data stored in multiple different Excel files that we want to leverage and bring in to really have them all combined onto one workbook, so we can do a comparison of our sales data with all those other countries. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in every single Excel file all here at one time. Okay, and so one of the things I wanted to showcase with this, and this is just, I've gone to my navigator here. This is the exact file that we're looking at. You can see I have 5 different countries, all saved, all their data is saved in different Excel workbooks, but everything within each file is set up exactly the same. We have same file structure in terms of columns and data types, but just different, as you can see, sizes here for each of those files, and just different input as far as the data for each of those countries. And so what I'm going to do is I want to pull in all of those files all at once, combine them all using the Power Query Editor, and then bring them into the data model to be able to expand upon them. So I'm going to go ahead and open that file folder up. I'm going to connect into all of them. And then what I'm going to choose is I'm going to go ahead and combine and transform all of those files into one single query. Now, being able to do that allows me to not have to go ahead and append or copy and paste, or go through all those manual processes that we might have done in the past in order to add those files all together. And so when I do that, it's going to go ahead and open up. Here's our preview file here. It's going to open up the Power Query Editor here in Excel. Now, in my previous videos, I've showcased the Power Query Editor here in Excel and how we can leverage the Power Query Editor to really set up our data, do some transforms on our data, to set it up so we can use the data the way that we want to have it. So what I'm going to quickly do here on this file is I'm going to do a quick little transform step here. I'm going to remove our source name column. I'm going to make sure that for our zip code here, I'm going to change that to a text data type, because anytime we want to have some type of identifier column, specifically zip code, we want to make sure we have that in a text type so we can get a leading 0 just in case that that leading 0 does exist, particularly here in the United States if you're thinking anywhere in the Northeast. And then I'm going to change our data type for our revenue column here to currency. All right, that's all pretty good to go. We don't need to worry about anything from there. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to load this into Excel in order to go ahead and build a pivot table or pivot chart or whatever type of visual that I want to have. And if I come over and decide to close and load our Power Query Editor, I can then see that now all those files are now being loaded into here. And so here, as you come down here to the bottom right, you'll see our query here, our world sales query here is now being loaded into Excel. And you notice as we go through the path here, all of the amount of rows that are now being loaded. Now, for those of us that work with Excel quite often, you know that this is probably going to end up with some type of problem because Excel has a row limit. And if you see here, now we're getting quite a few amount of errors along the way as well as we load this in because we have surpassed that row limitation inside of Excel. And once this finishes up, we'll see as we continue to go through here, once this finishes up, we're going to get a pop-up that says, hey, hold on a second. This is not going to work because we are trying to load in more data than Excel actually can handle. And so we're almost there. I believe this folder contains just about 2,990,000 or so rows of data. So we're just about there. And then once we go ahead and finish up, there it is, 2,990,000, we get this pop-up. The query returns more data than can fit on a worksheet. Okay, well, so what we need to do is we actually need to change this up. We need to say, you know what? I know that it can't work in traditional Excel. I want to load this data to the data model or PowerPivot because one of the amazing things about the data model here is that we can handle more than the 1,040,000 row limits that exist inside of Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And then what I'm going to choose, if I get my head out of the way here, is I'm going to come over here to our query where it says load to worksheet failed. If I hover over, you can see that we have our status right here. It's too large. So what we want to do is we want to load it to the data model. Now the data model again allows us to handle far greater amounts of data than in traditional Excel here. And also it allows us to build out our pivot table, pivot chart, etc. much faster and much more efficiently than we could here in Excel. So if I want to load to the data model, I can do it right here. Another place to do that is if I right click on the query itself, I can also select load to. And a third place is if I select edit right here, that's going to open up the Power Query editor once again. And then on the top left inside of the Power Query editor, instead of selecting close and load, I would select close and load to. Anytime you see load to, you should start to think about the data model. So I'm going to go ahead and select load to. Now here for our data model, okay, we have to decide how we want to view this data. Now what I would like to do, because we want to open this in the data model to be able to see every single row that's there, I'm going to select only create connection. And then what I also want to do is add it to the data model. So what this means is I'm only going to create a connection to that data. I'm not going to load every single row because if I try to load every single row, it's going to overload and we won't be able to fit it. And then I can go ahead and add it to the data model. When I select OK now, it's going to say first, oh, we have a possible data loss because we've created a table here in Excel. That table is not going to be there anymore if I select OK. For this case, that's fine because we're not going to use that table anyway because we're missing some data. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And so now we're going to go through the entire process once again to have all of those rows loaded here in Excel, but now they're not being loaded directly into this workbook. They're being loaded into the data model. So we're now already surpassing our row limit. We're pretty close to our final stage where we're trying to get to. So we're going to go all the way through. We do have some errors in this case, but that's all right for our example. We can go ahead and fix those errors later on. Potentially those errors are probably with our data type that we might have to edit as we go through. And we are about ready to go, almost at our 2,990,000. We're quite close there as we're almost there, almost. And there it is. All right, so now once this completely loads, you can see there it's completely loaded all the way through, okay? We can go ahead and open this table inside of our data model. Now, in order to see our data model, we can come on to our data tab and manage our data model. We also have a PowerPivot tab that allows us to manage the data model as well. All right, we can add directly to the data model from here as well. So we can go ahead and select Manage Data Model, and we're now going to get another pop-up window here. And here is where we can now see every single row, all 2,990,000 inside of our table. So every country that we showcased before, from Australia to Germany, Japan, Mexico, and Nigeria. Say I want to only see Japan. Notice how quickly the filtering happens. It's much faster, much more efficient here inside of the data model than inside traditional Excel. So if I want to see all of them, I can just clear all those filters. Now, one of the other great things that I can do here with the data model in Excel is say that next week we have now had sales for another country, or for your case, if you have additional sales or any type of data for your organization that you want to add in the future, that's the same data type, same structure as that Excel, of all those Excel sheets that you already leveraged in this folder. What we can do using the folder example is if I come back over to all of our countries here, and if I go back one level there, you'll notice I actually have another country that I have sales data for. If I want to add that in here, all I need to do is add that to the folder, come back into our data model, and select refresh. Here, if I go ahead and refresh that data, it is now going to point back to that folder location, look at all of the data inside of it, any new files existing there as well, go through all the transform steps that we've done in the Power Query Editor, and then apply them and load them into the data model all here, all at once. So the data model really allows us to leverage all the great things that the Power Query Editor lets us do as far as our data transforms, removing columns, adding columns, all those great things. But now we can just do more of it, right? Specifically here inside of Excel. So as this is now all going to be loading into our data model, so now the refresh is in progress, we are going to be able to have everything come on through. So it's still working here as we go through this refresh. It's taking a little bit longer here, but now there it is. It's now taking all those rows, retrieving them. Look how fast that is. Once it gets it, it does all the transform steps. We're now able to see, if I close this out, we can now see if I come in here, oh, there it is. There's the data for the new country we've just added in, Canada, and now look how fast it is. Look, our columns, our revenue, our zip, everything is there for those countries. It's really set up in a great way for us to see. All right, so now the next step for us is, now that we have our table loaded here into the data model, let's take a look at what the data model is. So some of the options that we have here inside of the data model is we can pull in more data, get external data from a lot of different sources. We can pull in from other databases, say from a SQL server, from Access, or from your analysis servers. Or services, excuse me. Then we can also pull in from another data service like our OData data feed, or from some other sources. You can see here from the other options here, we have Oracle, Teradata. We can pull in another Excel file. We can do everything directly here in PowerPivot if we want to pull in more data. We have also our existing connections, right? We can format columns and column structures here, however we want them to be done, just as we did in the Power Query Editor. We can also sort and filter columns. We can decide how we want to sort one column by the contents of another if we want to. We can add some calculations and summarizations if we need to here. Okay, what we can also do is we can come in and see our diagram view, which allows us to see our table in more of a format that lets us understand our data modeling and relationships, which we're actually going to come back to here in a moment. If I come over to the Design tab, you can see that this is where we can really design the table itself with our columns, our width. We can add in some functions here, some other options here. We can look at our table properties. We can also, which is a really great feature here inside of the data model, is we can add in a date table like that. We do not have to leverage any type of coding, anything inside of the Power Query Editor. We don't have to use any DAX or anything. We can just go ahead and say, you know what? I want to add in a new date table, looking at the data that's currently here, select new, and now I have a date table with our dates, our years, month number, month name. We have some different type of syntaxing of our month here, day of the week, number, day of week. We can do that all like that instantaneously just by clicking a button. It's a really great, amazing feature that many people don't even know that they can leverage here inside of PowerPivot for Excel. And then if we come into our advanced tab, we can start to see some perspectives here, some measures that we might want to have, start to leverage a little bit of advanced features here that we might want to be able to use as you start to populate your skill set here in PowerPivot. So if we come back to our home tab, let's go back into our diagram view here. Now here in our diagram view, once again, it allows us to look at our data, okay, look at our tables, look at the columns within our tables here, and start to do stuff with it. In this case, what I want to do is I actually want to make a relationship between these two tables in order for them to communicate. So if we build out a pivot table from this data model, we can actually pull data from our calendar table and from our world sales table at the same time and populate it in a single visual. If we do not have a relationship between these two tables, they won't be able to communicate. Therefore, that visual we try to create will not work. So in this case, creating a relationship is super easy, similar to if you are familiar with Power BI. All we need to do, find columns on each table that have similar data types and structure and content, and drag and drop. Now we have our relationship created. We have our one-to-many relationship, the one being right here, okay, in our date table, the one side. And then our many with our star here. We have our fact table or a data table, and we have our dimension table, okay, or our lookup table here in Excel. And so now if we wanted to create any type of visual pivot table or pivot chart, all we need to do is go ahead and create it. That's it. It's easy as that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say we want to create a pivot table. When I do that, I can just say where I want this pivot table to be created. I'm going to use my existing worksheet here. I'm going to hit OK. And so now all I need to do is populate our pivot table. So say I want to see my sales, okay, by, let's see if we want to look at our date hierarchy here. Maybe I want to see my sales by, we'll do our revenue and our values by year, right there. So now we can see all of our data, our revenue by year. Okay, pretty quick, pretty easy to do, very, very simple for us to be able to create. Now, you might be asking, okay, that's awesome, but what if I don't want to go all the way into our data model? What if I don't want to go through all those steps? I've already done that in the past. How can I leverage that pre-created data model that I have before to be able to, build out more? So if you want to do that, that's totally fine. Just come here into our Insert tab. Find a cell that you want to populate your new pivot table. Just select that cell. Come into our pivot table, and now what you'll notice is we have an option here to create a pivot table from the data model. So if I select from the data model, again, I get to choose where I'm pulling this from. Hit OK, and there is another pivot table. So for this one, maybe we want to see our world sales by country. Okay, so we'll do our revenue and our country, and then we maybe want to see, maybe we could do year as well. Okay, so each year, each country for each year. Or if we want to just revert that the other way, we could see our countries first and then all the years within it. And so we also have our date hierarchy for, say, 2012, and we can go deeper in a more granular level across the board, just as we know we can leverage inside of Excel all the time. So it's a really great way to use Excel, all the amazing features of Excel, but you can bypass all of those limits that we know Excel has. So we no longer have to worry about, making multiple Excel worksheets or workbooks. We can pull everything in here all at once, leveraging our data model, our PowerPivot for Excel, to be able to really take everything we want to do with our business analytics, our business intelligence, and just make it faster, make it easier for us to use. All right, well, thanks for joining me this time. Please join me in our next video of our series as we look to take this data model and migrate over into Power BI. So we can now see how we can really use Excel and Power BI together. And just as a reminder, if you like this video and every other video that we put out here, go ahead, drop us a like, hit that subscribe button, and feel free to check out more things that we have for you here at Pragmatic Works. Not only do we have all these free videos here on YouTube, but we also have our great on-demand learning platform that lets you really take a deep dive into all of the different classes we have to offer, including the 17 different classes we have on Power BI alone. So go ahead, take a check at that, and really join us on our journey here as we try to help everybody go through and really learn more inside of Power BI. All right, guys, thanks. Have a good one.